What if I told you that Lando Norris did commit a clear infraction at the Abu Dhabi GP, but the FIA decided not to sanction him despite having the evidence in front of their eyes? What if Nico Rosberg, world champion, revealed that the reason was much more political than sporting? Today you will know the whole truth. It all happened in the decisive stretch of the 2025 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Lando Norris, literally risking the championship, was in full battle with Yuki Tsunoda, Racing Bull's driver, and at the same time, a strategic piece of Red Bull to protect the interests of its star driver, Max Verstappen. The difference between the two was minimal. The Yas Marina layout, in its night version, offered an impressive visual context, but what was about to happen would eclipse any light show. Norris darted down the inside of the backstretch. Tsunoda responded with an aggressive, but legal maneuver until then. However, just when braking, the Japanese made a second change of direction, something expressly prohibited by the regulations if it is done to defend position. And here, chaos began to brew. Norris, to avoid contact that could have meant the abandonment of both, went completely off the track with all four wheels, taking an outside line that, although irregular, allowed him to complete the overtake. But what should have become a clear sanction according to current regulations, became one of the most questioned decisions of the year. The replay clearly showed that the Briton had gained an obvious advantage outside the track limits. However, hours passed and the FIA did not comment. The tension was cut with a knife. In the Red Bull pits, frustration was evident. Verstappen had done everything possible on the track. He had defeated his direct rivals, executed a strategy without errors, and maintained his championship pace. However, his fate was not in his hands, but on the desk of the sports stewards. Meanwhile, in the McLaren paddock, silence reigned. There were no celebrations, no euphoric declarations. The entire team was awaiting a resolution that could change everything. And if the FIA decided to sanction Norris with 5 seconds as it had done on previous occasions with similar situations, the final result would take him off the podium and award the championship to Max Verstappen. The Formula One world title, the one that defines careers, stories, and legacies, hung on a regulatory decision that for many was already clear. But it wouldn't be like that. With the eyes of the world focused on that single action, a debate was opened that quickly escaped from sports to settle into politics and the media. What weighs more? The limits of the regulations or the limits of what Formula One is willing to endure as a public image? The story of Norris overtaking not only put the final result of the championship in check, but also ignited a discussion about the extent to which the FIA can or should intervene in the outcome of a season. What seemed to be a simple action on the track became a historic turning point. And although the decision not to sanction Norris came hours later, with a technical justification that would be explained later by Nico Rosberg, the damage had already been done. The controversy was born. And the championship, even before it was made official, was already tainted by suspicion. When uncertainty was peaking and the entire Formula One was holding its breath, it was Nico Rosberg who broke the silence with a statement that would completely change the perception of the Norris case. From his privileged position as an analyst for Sky Sports and with direct access to internal sources within the paddock and the FIA, Rosberg revealed the real reason behind the most controversial decision of the 2025 season. His words were not just another opinion among many. They were the exposure of an internal mechanism of the system that very few know and that almost never comes to light. According to Rosberg, the FIA did not simply apply a standard interpretation of the regulations. It was not a matter of letting it go, as was superficially said. It was something much deeper. It was a decision based on a specific clause of the International Sports Code, force majeure. This rarely invoked clause allows stewards to exempt a driver from punishment when it is determined that the action that led to an infraction was caused by an unavoidable external factor or an immediate safety need. In this case, Tsunoda's illegal defense was interpreted as the trigger for an evasive maneuver by Norris. And it was that carefully crafted interpretation that ended up saving the McLaren driver from a penalty that would have cost him the championship. The key was in the telemetry and frame-by-frame analysis of Norris on board. According to reports leaked to the media and validated by Rosberg, the FIA concluded that the Briton had already carried out the overtake just before all four wheels crossed the track limit. That is to say, the critical moment of the maneuver had been completed within the legal margins, and the departure from the runway was classified as a secondary consequence, necessary to avoid a collision due to the two changes of direction that Tsunoda had executed in his attempt to defend the position. This defense was labeled by the FIA as dangerous and contrary to the regulations. Thus, ironically, the offender was the driver who was trying to protect his place, not the one who controversially overtook him. But there is a second level to this story that Rosberg hinted at, although he did not express it so directly. This is the political dimension of the decision. According to sources close to the FIA, there was an unwritten consensus that the 2025 championship could not afford to end in an office, as happened at the infamous close of the 2021 season. Formula One's image had already been damaged that time. Repeating a similar scenario where the title is defined by a technical penalty after the checkered flag would have been devastating for the credibility of the category and its global projection. In other words, the commissioners knew that any decision was going to have a major impact, and they opted for the path that minimized the media damage. Rosberg even hinted that this resolution could set a dangerous precedent. Because if the regulation becomes something interpretive depending on the media or commercial context, then it stops being a sports code and becomes a political instrument. However, he did not deny that the justification was technically supported. What he did question was the consistency with which it is applied. In previous seasons, drivers like Sergio Perez, Fernando Alonso, or even Verstappen himself were penalized for similar maneuvers. In less decisive circumstances, Rosberg's intervention not only clarified the reasons behind Norris's exoneration, but also opened a new debate. One that goes beyond overtaking itself and delves into the structural values of modern Formula One. What weighs more? The cold letter of the regulations or the fragile balance between spectacle and sporting justice? That is the real question that the 2016 world champion left floating. And that is the question that for now the FIA seems unwilling to answer with total transparency. To truly understand why the FIA made the decision it did at Abu Dhabi 2025, it is essential to look beyond overtaking and technical analysis. We must observe what was happening at the highest levels of the paddock, where sporting decisions begin to mix with commercial interests, power balances, and the global narrative that Formula One needs to project. And this is where McLaren, the fittest team of the last 2 years, becomes a central piece of the puzzle. FIA decisions are not made in a vacuum. They are in constant contact with Liberty Media, the organizers, the teams, and the sponsors. The Formula One business is today a global entertainment machine that not only sells races, but stories. Which story was more powerful to close the season? A four-time champion Verstappen in gray form, due to a technical penalty on his rival? Or a new champion, young, challenging, who wins on the track and represents the future of the sport? The answer was obvious. And so, although the FIA's official justification remained within the margins of the regulations, many saw the decision as a subtle way to protect that narrative, to ensure that the sport offered an ending that would excite the audience and generate positive headlines. This is not about stating that there was direct manipulation, but rather recognizing that, in such a complex sport, nuances and interpretations can always lean towards where there is more to lose or more to gain. The figure of Yuki Tsunoda, in the midst of the storm that was unleashed after Lando Norris overtaking in Abu Dhabi 2025, became one of the most enigmatic and discussed of the entire season finale. From the get-go, his role seemed clear. He was defending his track position like any competitive driver would. But as the hours passed, and with the intervention of the FIA, the readings about his behavior began to become more complex. Was he simply a victim of a borderline maneuver? Or was he carrying out unspoken instructions within a team strategy to protect Max Verstappen? To understand this duality, it is necessary to first analyze the tactical context of the moment. Tsunoda, a driver for Racing Bulls, a satellite team of Red Bull, was just ahead of Lando Norris in the final laps of the Grand Prix. Verstappen, for his part, had already fulfilled what was expected of him. Win the race, stay within the limits, and score the necessary points to put pressure on McLaren in the fight for the title. But since the championship depended directly on Norris's result, any possibility of stopping him legally or not became a key chess piece. Tsunoda is no rookie. He knows that his movements are followed by cameras, engineers, and managers. He knows that any excessive maneuver can become a penalty. And yet, in the middle of the straight, he executed not one, but two defensive movements, a weaving prohibited by the regulations, which were essential for the FIA to later justify Norris's action as an evasion for safety. Why did he do it? That is the question that has divided the paddock. So the question remains open. Was Yuki Tsunoda a supporting actor trapped in a film written by others? Or was it a pawn who agreed to move his piece knowing that it would be off the board when the game ended? In a sport where every thousandth counts and every movement has consequences, that fine line between being a victim or an accomplice can change everything. And in this case, there is still no clear verdict. Only silence remains, and suspicion. Leave your opinion in the comments what you think about all this.